Have you ever felt trapped, even when there were no chains around you, as if the prison cell was inside, not outside? Prison doesn't always have bars. Sometimes it lives in the gap between what you hope for and what never comes. It's the not yet that drags on for months. It's the reply that never arrived. It's the door that seems locked, even when no one closed it. You look around and everything seems normal, but inside, something lies in ruins. There are screams you don't let out. There are battles you'd fight in silence. And there's one question that lingers. Why does nothing change? But what if the prison is preparation? What if the silence is the school of the strong? What if the freedom you're waiting for isn't on the outside, but just a few steps within you? Today, we're stepping into a dark cell, a place where hope should have died, where a chained man found peace, not because the chains broke, but because he no longer needed them to feel free. Peter, disciple, fisherman, imprisoned, not for a mistake, but for following a path. He didn't scream, he didn't beg, he slept. Yes, slept. And in that quiet act, there's a hidden philosophy, a secret power we'll uncover today. Stay until the end, because this story has the power to change how you see silence, waiting, and even suffering. And if you seek wisdom that doesn't force itself but transforms, subscribe now. Here, every story is a compass for the soul, a way to find direction when everything seems still. Today, we'll discover the Stoic message behind Peter's imprisonment. It was night in Jerusalem, a night like any other in appearance, but heavy with the invisible weight only silent injustice brings. The alleys were dark, the houses asleep, and in the streets, the wind blew without witnesses. But somewhere, behind stone walls, a Roman prison held more than a body. It held a soul in silence. Peter was there, imprisoned, his hands bound in iron shackles, his body flanked by 2 soldiers. There was no privacy, no space for prayers allowed. The walls weren't what imprisoned him, it was the watchful eyes of the guards. The execution order set for dawn, and the recent memory of James' death, whom Herod had killed. Peter was next, and he knew it. The environment was hostile. The cell, damp and cold. The stone floor bruised his knees. Mold clung to the walls. The smell of death hung in the air. It was the kind of place that devours the hope of the weak and tests the resolve of the strong. But Peter was quiet. He didn't murmur, he didn't complain, and more than that, he slept deeply. The modern mind might see this detail with suspicion. How can someone rest in peace while their death sentence waits for dawn? How can a man of flesh and blood surrender to sleep in the face of imminent death? But this wasn't escape. It was a state of mind. Peter didn't sleep from physical exhaustion. He slept because he was at peace, not with the situation, but with his own soul. He had accepted the path not with passive resignation, but with the dignity of one who understands that the only control that truly matters is internal. Peter knew he had no power over Herod, over the soldiers, over the unjust system surrounding him, but he had power over himself, over his mind, over his heart. And that, in the eyes of the Stoics, is true freedom. What Marcus Aurelius would call to rule oneself in any circumstance. While he slept, the unseen moved. That same night, a light pierced the darkness of the cell. A heavenly messenger entered, silent as the breeze before dawn. There were no thunderclaps, no lightning, just a presence. The angel touched his shoulder and said, "Get up quickly." Peter opened his eyes but didn't panic. It was as if he had expected it, not in form, but in essence. The chains fell from his wrists like dry leaves in autumn. The angel continued, "Put on your cloak, tie your sandals," and Peter obeyed, still not fully sure if he was dreaming or awake. He asked no questions. He didn't hesitate. He simply followed. They passed the first guard, then the second. No eyes turned, no hands rose. The iron gate, heavy and imposing, opened on its own, and Peter stepped into the street. Dawn greeted him with silence. No trumpets awaited him, no group of believers, no celebration, just him and the fresh air of freedom. And there, standing in the darkness of the empty street, Peter realized what had happened. He stopped, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Now I know. The Lord has freed me." He didn't shout, didn't weep, didn't fall to his knees. He simply acknowledged, not just the physical liberation, but the one within, because, in truth, Peter had already been freed before the chains let go. His soul was no longer shackled. His mind was no longer in conflict. He had already made peace with the silence, the waiting, the death. This is where silent faith meets timeless philosophy. Peter's posture echoes Epictetus' words. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Peter didn't see his cell as an end. He saw it as a passage, and he walked through it with dignity. He didn't need anyone's approval, didn't need the guards to understand him, didn't need his faith justified by circumstances. He had already chosen serenity. The cell was real, but it wasn't the prison. The prison was the loss of meaning, the anxiety over what can't be controlled, the rage over what can't be changed. But Peter had already broken free from those chains. Sleeping that night was an act of faith, but also an act of wisdom, a demonstration of self-control in its purest form. As Seneca said, suffering is often just a matter of perspective. What we fear is usually less terrible than we imagine. Peter no longer feared, not because he thought he'd survive, but because he no longer depended on the outcome to keep his integrity. He remained whole in adversity. That is the true victory. When the world tries to break you, and you remain. As he walked the streets of Jerusalem that dawn, Peter didn't look like a fugitive. He looked like a monk, a serene man, aware of every step, hearing only the sound of his own breath and the echo of his thoughts. There was no human glory, no visible reward, but there was freedom, and it wasn't new. It was just now manifesting on the outside, because it had already existed within. Peter's story isn't just a religious miracle, it's a symbol, a reminder that the greatest miracle isn't escaping a stone prison, it's not being ruled by it while still inside. Freedom isn't a place, it's a posture, it's a decision. It's the silence that accepts what can't be controlled and turns the cell into a sanctuary. Peter's prison is a mirror. It shows us that inevitable suffering doesn't have to be destructive, that injustice faced with composure cannot corrupt those who already know themselves, that silent waiting, far from being weakness, can be the noblest form of strength. And in the end, what remains isn't just the memory of a man saved by an angel, but of someone who, even before that, had already been saved by his own awareness, by his surrender, by his peace. He was freed because he was no longer a prisoner of himself. This is the message that echoes through centuries, that unites faith and philosophy, that turns suffering into the seed of wisdom. Peter didn't just survive prison, he taught us how to navigate our own. Peter's serenity in that prison wasn't passivity, nor was it delusion. It was what the Stoic philosophers would call hegemonikon, the soul's governance over itself. It was inner mastery, a state of presence that doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on how the mind responds to them. While chains bound his wrists, his consciousness remained free. While the world awaited his death, Peter was at peace with life. In that cold cell, with no guarantee of tomorrow, he didn't writhe in despair, didn't beg for immediate intervention, didn't rage against God's silence. He remained steady, composed, silent on the outside, awake within. His calm wasn't weakness, it was the pinnacle of emotional strength, the strength of one who understood what Epictetus would later teach: no man is free who is not master of himself. This sentence captures the Stoic essence of Peter's attitude. Freedom isn't the absence of physical constraints, but the absence of internal bondage. Whoever masters their emotions, understands their thoughts, and discerns what is within their control and what isn't, that is the truly free man. Peter didn't try to convince the guards, didn't plead for mercy, didn't make a scene. He didn't resist events, but neither did he cower before them in fear. He faced them. He met reality as it was, without drama, without victimhood. And that acceptance, far from defeat, was his greatest victory. Because when you don't need the world to change for your soul to remain at peace, you've already won. Seneca, speaking of true freedom, wrote, "True freedom is to live as nature intended, with dignity, courage, self-control, and wisdom." These four virtues were there, embodied in a man who seemed defenseless but was spiritually unbreakable. Dignity, because he didn't debase himself before injustice. Courage, because he faced the possibility of death with serenity. Self-control, because he didn't react in panic. Wisdom, because he recognized that time and destiny belonged to a higher order. The Stoics didn't deny suffering, they accepted it as part of existence. To them, living well meant aligning with universal reason, the logos, and Peter, even without using that language, embodied the same principle. He didn't seek to control the narrative. He didn't try to escape at all costs. He inhabited the moment, as if saying, "If this is my hour, let it find me whole." The profound beauty in this lies in understanding that suffering doesn't have to corrupt us. That adversity, far from being punishment, can be the stage where hidden virtues are revealed. Peter wasn't invulnerable, but he was unshakable, and that is a crucial difference. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Peter, in his cell, already knew this. Maybe not in Rome's words, but with the clarity of silent faith. His trust wasn't in escape, but in integrity. His strength didn't come from guarantees, but from surrender. He wasn't enslaved by fear of the future. He belonged to the present moment. That set him free. That's why, when the chains fell and the angel appeared, he wasn't startled. He obeyed calmly, as if he'd already been told from within. The external liberation was just the visible manifestation of a freedom that already existed in his spirit. He wasn't saved by the escape. He was revealed in it. This is the virtue of endurance, not the stubborn pride that fights blindly, but the endurance of maturity that bears what must be borne without losing oneself in the process. It's the art of remaining whole. Even when everything around you lies in ruins, Peter teaches us, just as the Stoics did, that there is a strength that doesn't shout, a courage that needs no stage, a faith that manifests in silence. He reminds us that the true prison is living under the rule of unchecked emotions, and true freedom is self, especially and most crucially when the world strips away everything external. And perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest miracle wasn't the angel's visit. It was Peter's peace, hours before the angel arrived, because that peace, number one could give him, not even heaven. It could only be born from within. And you, are you living in your own invisible prison? Maybe the chains holding you today don't make a sound, but you feel their weight. They're not made of iron. They're made of fear, of anxiety for what hasn't yet come, of guilt over past choices, of words you swallowed, of forgiveness you never dared to offer or ask for. Who hurt you, and you still carry them inside, as if it were your fault. What pain did you sweep under the rug, thinking time would dissolve it, only for it to return in the silence of the night? Sometimes, the cruelest prison has no bars. It's the one no one sees. It's the forced smile, the automatic "I'm fine," while inside, you scream for relief. Could this silence that unsettles you be your preparation? Could this time where nothing seems to happen be the sacred interval where your soul is being trained? Peter slept, but not because he gave up. He slept because he trusted, because he understood that not every battle is won with immediate action, that some victories are born in patience, that some triumphs only bloom after the internal winter. You're trying to force the door open, but have you considered it might be closed because it's not yet time to walk through? Sometimes, what looks like inertia is a process, a call to turn inward, to align your soul with truth, to break free from everything that binds you inside, the need for control, the rush, the constant self-judgment, the fear of loss, the fear of being unseen. Peter's story invites us to stop looking only outward, to release the obsession with when, and start asking, how am I handling the now? Could what you call failure just be a moment of transition? Could this difficult relationship be the field where you develop both compassion and strength? Could this waiting the one that feels endless be forging the very maturity you'll need when the answer finally arrives? You don't need to break the door. Perhaps it's already opening, but it will only swing wide when you're ready to walk through it without carrying the old you. Peter left the prison without haste, without fanfare, without spectacle, and you trying to rush what will only happen when there's peace inside. True freedom doesn't come when circumstances change. It begins when you change your posture toward them, when you stop demanding and start understanding, when you choose not to react with desperation, but with presence. If you feel trapped, ask yourself, who holds the keys to my freedom? Is it someone else? Is it time? Or is it me with my eyes closed to what I need to face? Your prison might be a stagnant career, a toxic relationship, an existential void, or just the monotony of days that repeat themselves. But none of these define you, and none of them have to keep you captive. Peter's liberation began before the angel's visit. It began the moment he chose to trust, the moment he chose to rest, even without knowing what tomorrow held. Maybe what you need right now isn't a miracle, but a silent decision to stop fighting against time, and start cultivating peace within it. Breathe. Listen. Notice what's trying to emerge inside you. You're not trapped. You're being prepared. A free soul doesn't wait for the key. It doesn't struggle against the locked door. It doesn't beg time to move faster. It simply rests, not out of weakness, but wisdom, because it knows the right door opens at the right time. This is the quiet maturity few understand. It's the power of those who've realized that haste is often just disguised desperation, and that true mastery isn't about controlling everything, but trusting steadily when nothing seems under control. Peter wasn't saved because he begged. He was freed because he was ready. And maybe that's your story too. How many times have you found yourself trapped in situations with no apparent way out? How many sleepless nights trying to force solutions that only time can mend? What if, instead of breaking the door, you learned to wait in peace, to endure with dignity, to trust with courage? It's not easy, but it's in that silence, in that space between what was and what will be, that the soul is refined. There, a strength is born that needs no audience, a freedom that requires no external validation, a power that doesn't shout, but sustains. If this story stirred something deep in you, if you too feel caught in an invisible process, living something no one understands, yet still standing, you're not alone. This space exists for you, for those weary of noise and seeking direction, for those who prefer wisdom over quick answers, for those who understand that the greatest victories often happen in silence. Here, every story is a compass for the soul, every word a lantern in the dark, and every prison a chance to discover that true freedom doesn't begin when the door opens, but when the heart stops fighting against it. So if something whispered yes within you as you listened to this story, consider joining. Not to consume more content, but to walk with more awareness. More presence, more inner strength. Because in the end, as Seneca said, it's not because things are difficult that we dare not. It's because we dare not that they become difficult. Dare to wait wisely. Dare to trust the silence. And remember, a free soul doesn't wait for the key. It rests, knowing the right door will open at the right time.